What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Road Painter channel. I am the Road Painter, aka JD, and this is another episode of Mortal Realms Monday painting tutorials. So today we're going to be painting this lovely Myrmourn Banshee. That's the one, or Myrmourn, whatever it is. It's a Banshee. So this will be a nice easy paint job on this one. What we're going to do for this episode is everything you see here in white, so the Banshee herself, and then the base will be in a separate video, which I'll put a link to up in the corner there and down in the description. So if you want to do the base first and then move on to the Banshee, you can do that, or you can do it the way we're going to do it here, do the Banshee first and then the base. I do advise not sticking the model in. I haven't here, she's just gripped in there nicely, and that way you can remove her once painted or before painting, do the base and then put her back in. Makes getting to areas under here a lot easier without risking getting paint on the rest of the miniature. So without further ado, let's go. Now what we're going to do with this is we're going to use a contrast paint, the Ethermatic Blue, and for this we're going to do the cloak with a darker shade of the bottom leading up to a white, and then for her dress in here we're going to do it the opposite, so it's going to be darker up top and lighter at the bottom. So what we're going to do first is get a half decent paintbrush. For this one I'm using a size 3. This way we can layer it on quite quick. Give the paint a good shake up, and we'll apply this to the palette if we can get it open. We'll apply this to the palette so we can work from there. You can work straight from the pot if you prefer. It's just I prefer to work from the palette. Just makes it a bit easier for me rather than trying to hold this lid up. They don't tend to hold too well up here. That should be enough for what we want. Right, no need to rinse the brush off for this one. So all we're going to do is start for about 75% of the way up, as the top is going to be white anyway, so we'll just start where sort of the highest creases are. We're going to pull down and let it sort of fill up in the bottom, but we are going to cover everything. The idea is to give it a blue tone. Give it more of an ethereal look. So just start at the top. Like I said, we're aiming for, you know what, let's just do all of it, all of the top, because we can dry brush a white over after. Obviously try and get it as thin as possible at the top, just let it sort of sit in those recess areas, and then we can let it pool a little bit more at the base of the miniature, especially in sort of areas like this. So again, pull it off the top, don't let it sit too much up there, but we can let it sit in these recesses a little, especially down at the bottom. So now the good thing with these contrast paints is they tend to sit in the recesses. They do stain the highlight areas, but you can get them to sit down in the recesses almost like a wash, but they're slightly thicker, or they don't flow as much. And then obviously remember to do the inside as well. And with this we are going to do the flesh of the miniature. Normally some people may colour it or paint the flesh in more of a flesh tone, but personally I believe that the you know, they're ghosts, they're spirits, so their entire body is going to be ghostly as well, with exception to any clothing that they're wearing. You could say that is that is spiritual too, but seeing as clothing isn't alive, it can't have a spirit, so clothing will do as a regular colour. Everything else, now you'll notice I'm not doing the dress just yet. I want to get that done separately, as we are going to be going in reverse in terms of how much shading we're putting in. So obviously have it pulled at the bottom, get some more back on the palette. Now, the palette I'm using here is actually a wax based tear off paper palette, designed for oil paints and acrylic paints for, you know, traditional style art. I find they are quite good, especially with stuff like this. The paints don't sort of dry up in them. You know, some palettes, they tend to get absorbed a little bit, but because of the waxy surface, it's fine. I wouldn't recommend doing it on a wet palette because of the porous surface and the water underneath. You may end up with your paints thin more than you'd like. Let's just try and get some of that under there, and then we'll just brush this down. Obviously gravity's trying to do its thing here, so we're just going to take some of that off. And because these are contrast paints, they are designed to be painted with a little more, so you can, if you want to, do multiple layers with them. I'm using it a little bit more like a wash rather than a painting system. And obviously the same under here. Right, and then with the dress, we would like to start at the top and the back. Just get that done in. And now we'll tip the model upside down because we want the darker area up the top here. So tipping upside down will mean that gravity will work this way for us. And obviously what we're looking for is more of the paint at the top and less at the bottom. Okay, so once that layer has had time to dry, next up we're going to do knocking stuff about here. We're going to do a dry brush layer of ceramite white. And what we're going to do is apply some of the white to our palette. Don't need a lot. And then just dab off the excess onto a paper towel. If you test it on your thumbnail or thumb, what you're looking for is barely any coming off, so you can just barely see it there. And then all we're going to do, starting from the top of the miniature, we're just going to pull across all the raised areas so that that white just makes contact with it. If you barely have any on your brush, you can press quite firm and you'll get more of an even coat there. You'll pick it up better on the edges. And what we're looking to do is almost cover the entire top, sort of 30-40% of the miniature, with a solid white. And then as you get down towards the bottom, there'll be less white and more of the blue. So what will happen is the blue will show through the area of white that is less applied. So, and then the top, as that will have more layers of white, that will become more white looking, more opaque. So just work our way all the way down until the creases or the wrinkles start to open up and become less, and then we can just do a bit of a rough brushing, but we're not wanting to cover too much of that blue with this, so try not to overdo it too much. And then we can work back at the top, and what will happen if you start at the top, and by the time you get to the bottom, the majority of the white paint has already come off the bristles, and so you're just putting a very fine dusting over the top. Obviously if you start the other way, you're going to end up applying a lot more white to the bottom of the miniature than what you actually intend. Right, so I apply a bit more white to the palette. I always tend to apply less than I need, that way you're not wasting too much. If you do use, don't use it all. If you do, you can just apply a bit more to the palette. So obviously with the dress area, we're wanting to go into reverse of what we just did, so you want more on the bottom and then work your way up. I find pulling in one direction is best, and obviously as you get further up as well, you can sort of pull away from the miniature slightly, so only a few hairs are touching, and then we can work our way back down. And then obviously the same on the back side there. So pull across and pull most of the paint off on the bottom, and then just gently and lightly apply it further up. And the underside of the ethereal cloak, we can do the same kind of thing. Start at the top, pulling across, and then bring it down. We don't have to cover as much of the bottom area with this, as about 50% or 40% is around about here, which as you can see is there, but on the inside it doesn't seem to be as much of an area, because we haven't got the top of the hood and that on the inside. And then we can just do a slight dry brushing over the hands on the top, not the bottom, just the top area, so that we have the light coming from the top down onto the miniature. And then obviously make sure the face is done, but try not to get any paint into the eyes or the inside of the nose there. And then all we can do is just lightly pick up the edges with a bit of a dry brush, just to highlight some of these outer edges. Obviously don't want to do that down over the blue. There we go. So that's the model almost done. It's just a small area in there and the dagger. And like I say, the base will be in the next video alongside this one. Right, obviously make sure to give your brush a good clean off, especially after dry brushing. It tends to sort of work the paint into the bristles a little bit more. And because the paint is on there is essentially thin, very, very thin, it does dry a little bit more on the bristles. So just make sure that that is all off before putting your brush away. Right, so now we can move on to the corset. And for that, we're just going to use some Myrmourn Brown. So again, apply it to our palette. Probably don't need too much. That should do. And with this, we want to thin it down slightly. Just a small amount of water will do. And then we can go in and paint the corset. Try not to get that brown on any of the spectral area, the ghostly area that we've already done. This will look quite dark to start with, but obviously we're going to highlight it and that, so don't worry too much. Be careful when doing these edges along here. Obviously you don't want to get onto that area that we've already done. If you do, then because it is a darker area up here, it is easy enough to go back over with the Ethermatic and Night Gloom mix. Obviously this is my way of painting. If you decide you want to do this area first, then by all means do so, and then you can do the ghostly area afterwards if you're concerned about getting this paint on areas that you don't want. But I find that even if you do it the other way round, if you get paint on the ethereal area, you're going to end up with a dark spot when you put your wash over the top. But you could always, you know, neaten it up first with white and then do your ethereal over the top of that once the white has dried. So like I say, entirely up to you. Get down in there, get the leather strap for the daggers scabbard here. I think that's what you call them, for daggers. Right, so we'll just let that dry. There we go. Seems I've got a little bit on the inside there, so just touch that up the best that we can. If not, I can go back in with a small amount of white over the top. There you go, done. Right, now for the dagger and the scabbard part here. I think for the inside of the scabbard, for this area, I think it's got a couple of raised sections, and for that, the raised sections will go in with a bit of Balthazar gold, and for the rest of it, we'll go in with the brown and give it a leather look. Alright, so next up for the dagger itself, we'll do some iron breaker. Right, and there is a couple of areas just down here that we'll throw in with this as well. It's not part of the base, it is part of the miniature, although it is base material. So we'll just paint that spike there, and the railing itself here, and then a small part of it there. Right, and that is that done. So now we're going to take some Balthazar gold. And we're just going to do this area of the dagger and the handle there, and there is a section straight down the middle here, just very barely touching it, just to apply the paint. Then again on the back side, just down the centre of the dagger for a small section. Don't forget the pommel near her hand. And then a couple of small bits around the centre of the dagger here. I know they do blend in with the leather a little bit, but once we do the lighter highlight for the leather, it should stand out a little bit better. There we go, so that's that done. And for the final piece, we're just going to take some Zandri dust and do a small, light dry brushing over the leather corset there. And it is super important that your dry brush is dry when doing this. There we go. So just a very light dusting over the top, just to try and catch some of these areas here. If you want to do this with a smaller round brush, you could probably get away with it. Usually I don't recommend round brushes for dry brushing, as they tend to go more streaky, but with such a small area you shouldn't have that problem. So just dry brush over the top of the entire thing there, and the same with the dagger holder here. Just a light dry brushing. Don't worry too much about getting under there, it would be darker anyway. And all we can do is just a slight amount of white, mix that in just to give us one more pale tone. Again, get the majority of that off, and then just on some of the more raised edges, just one more layer of highlight across the centre there, and just off some of the edges. Barely noticeable, but just a little extra. Right, so all that's left now is to take some Agrax Earthshade, and just apply that to any of the Balthazar gold areas. This will just darken it up slightly, and we can also do this over the leather area. Just to bring out those recesses, darken them up slightly. Do that over the whole thing. Make sure to get round the back so that it darkens and blends. And then over the dagger as well. Normally I'd do a non-oil on steel, but as this is such a small area, it won't have much effect. No noticeable difference, so we can just get away with the Agrax just to darken the dagger up slightly. And there we have it. Aside from the base, the Banshee is finished. So there you have it, guys. One finished Banshee. You can check the other video. I'll put the link here and in the description for the base there. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and check that bell so that you get further notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Like I say, for Mortal Realms, it will be Mortal Realms Monday, so every Monday. And thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.